For more, I want to bring in now two members of Congress who've also served. So we're going to get dual and spherical experience here. August Pfluger, Republican congressman from Texas, served in the Air Force for 20 years. Mike Gallagher, Republican congressman from Wisconsin, who served in the Marine Corps for 7 years. Congressman, thank you so very much, both of you, for being on the program. Congressman Pfluger, I'm going to start with you and what we've just heard from the Pentagon and feather it out a little bit for what this means now with yet another date certain given at that news conference by John Kirby. Another date. So now the new date is August 31st. Do we have to keep doing this?
Well, it just goes back to the lack of leadership from President Biden. When you telegraph your plan to the enemy, it's basically military strategy 101. Don't tell them where you're going to operate, when you're going to operate, and how you're going to operate, and that's exactly what they've done. And what we need to focus on at this point in time is evacuating the American citizens there. I also have a constituent who's married to an Afghan pilot. They're in Uzbekistan, and the Taliban are asking the Uzbek government to send them back to Afghanistan where they face certain death. We have to focus on the tactical execution. It's been a disaster so far. We need to get Americans to safety, and we need to take care of the Afghan military personnel and interpreters that we promised we would help.
Congressman Pfluger, just one quick follow-up. I'm so curious now that you have brought up this constituent of yours, Uzbekistan, these other countries. Are they going to see the Taliban as legitimate, and would they give one of our American citizens to them?
Well, it's a good question, and I spoke with a high-level government official from Uzbekistan yesterday, and basically they said these are our neighbors. They're calling us to send back, basically to deport almost 600 Afghan military personnel, wow, of which the one that I'm talking about is included in. They have to deal with the government, whoever it is, because they're neighbors. And so it's a very tenuous situation. We need to evacuate them from there, and I'm calling on the Biden administration to do the right thing and get them to safety.
Congressman Gallagher, when you look at the pictures now that have played out in the last 24 hours, and you know the Taliban are massing outside the gates of that airport, but so far no engagement with our U.S. forces, according just moments ago to the Pentagon. What does that communicate to you about the enemy? Are they really deal makers, or is there something else we need to see in all of this?
Well, I don't trust the Taliban, and I agree with August 100% that our Pentagon shouldn't be broadcasting an arbitrary date for withdrawal. Our message should be, we're going to do what we need to do to get our people out of there. And however long it takes and however hard it is, we're not going to leave anybody behind. And if the Taliban messes with us, well, we will meet that with devastating consequences. But instead, the Biden administration just keeps bungling this withdrawal. I mean, this is an epic foreign policy catastrophe. The president's speech yesterday was a disgrace, blaming the Afghan people, blaming his predecessor. We've already had a Saigon moment, what seems worse than a Saigon moment. Now we have a Dunkirk moment. Can we get our people out? Can we muster some creativity and energy to save our people? And that's an open question, just given the incompetence we've seen from the White House so far.
Look, I've had generals, former generals, that is, retired, tell me recently that it feels like we're going to have to surge our way in there. There are 4,000 on the ground. We know that they have put into motion some 7,000 U.S. forces. Congressman Gallagher, does that seem like that will be enough?
The honest answer is we don't know. I mean, and even Kirby in the press conference was not that specific about, you know, what is the extent of the mission? Are we just putting a perimeter around the airport? How many Americans do we have that are outside of that perimeter right now? And not just in Kabul, in various parts of the country, as well as August alludes to, a variety of constituents who may not be American citizens, but are connected to American citizens that we all represent. There are a ton of unanswered questions. And for the life of me, I just do not understand the intelligence failure and the operational failure behind this. Why did we give up Bagram, for example, before we had actually effectuated the withdrawal of our people? It makes absolutely no sense.
You know, I'm looking at some of the details that have come from the Taliban. Their spokesperson is holding their first news conference. So as they try to get the world to see them as having some legitimacy, They put out, some statements. I don't know what the question and answer situation will look like. But for right now, they are trying to convince the world that things are going to be very different, Congressman, when it comes to how women will be treated. They'll be honored under Islamic law. Earlier rule restricted women's lives. Taliban spokesperson asserts that women's rights will be different and that they will be allowed to serve and so on and so forth. I mean, we were at war for 20 years in that nation. Some of the children now have only known a world where we were there and they were freer than they had ever been. So, Congressman Pfluger, what do you make of the new Taliban? And I put that in quotes.
Well, it certainly is a less secure place than it was 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. And, you bring up the Taliban holding a news conference and getting their message out. Where is President Biden? Why is he not communicating? And he's previously said, I'll own any mistakes. Well, this is a mistake of epic proportions. And the women and children are in extreme danger. And I don't believe the Taliban for 1 minute that it's going to be a new regime. They are going to get revenge. You have the Chinese Communist Party, who is looking to basically recognize them as a real government. And our enemies are watching. And that's the real impact that we're seeing here. Russia and China are watching. If you're Taiwan, you have to feel very insecure at this point in time because you can't depend on President Biden and this administration to keep you secure. And this is the administration that said we're going to go out and rebuild and reform our relationships. Well, that's nonsense. They've done exactly the opposite. And now America is going to feel that impact as a less secure place as well.
Congressman Gallagher, a real quick last word from you. One of your colleagues across chamber, Senator Rick Scott, Republican, floated on Twitter the 25th Amendment to remove President Biden over his handling of the exit from Afghanistan. Your take?
Well, let's get everyone out of the country, including American citizens first, and then we can have a big old messy fight about where the blame goes. I agree with August that the effect on American deterrence of this catastrophe is going to be devastating. And to the point about China, I mean, they were selling this as a way to free up resources for China. It's having the opposite effect. We had to reroute a carrier to cover the withdrawal. Pakistan's victory threatens India. India is the key partner in the fight against China. It doesn't make sense on geopolitical terms. So if nothing else, Biden should surrender the right to have a second term in office because he has messed up U.S. foreign policy.
Congressman Pfluger and Gallagher, thank you so much for your service, first of all, in the military, and for being here today to help us get through some of the breaking news. Appreciate you being in focus.
Thanks, Harris.